Hello everyone, and welcome to FerMUN 2020. To begin with, we'd like to invite our FerMUN Secretary General, Maureen Barch, to give her opening remarks. Madam Secretary General, you have the floor. It looks like, thanks.
I'm here, sorry. Dear all, I may not be able to see each and every one of you individually, but I know you're out there somewhere, and that's the most important. So in the name of the entire FerMUN family, I'd like to express our heartfelt welcome to FerMUN 2022. Today, I'd like to talk to you about three things: solidarity, our FerMUN community, also known as FerMUnity, and finally, why this speech is the answer to all of your dreams. You'll find out why soon enough. First of all, knowing that around 600 students, teachers, and other participants from across the world are watching this opening ceremony right now is such an incredible feeling. It makes me so happy and hopeful, because if you can hear me right now, it means that you care. It means that you care about your future and about what's going on in the world right now. It means that you care about all the wonderful things life has to offer and that you wish to preserve them. But ultimately, it means that you care about others, especially those who are perhaps less fortunate than you are. And you care so much that you're even willing to spend these next few days sat behind a desk, staring at a computer screen. And we all know how uncomfortable that can be. And yet, you're still here. I'm going to guess it's because, like me, you value change, communication, as well as our top quality memes on our Instagram FerMUN page. And if all of those things together are here, then it definitely makes staring at a computer screen for a few hours worth it. The central part of any Model UN conference is, of course, the debates. So I'd like to applaud all you delegates who've invested so much time in researching your topics and country positions. Your diplomatic passion and willingness to work with others is definitely what we need more of these days. What makes our conference run so smoothly, though, and what makes FerMUN such a lively, entertaining, and memorable experience is the continuous efforts of our admin, bilingual, press, and communication teams. Shout out to all of them. And of course, where would any of us be without our dear chairs? I know for a fact that they have spent so many days and nights preparing for this conference that they will probably need a full week of sleep afterwards to make up for it. Thank you. A lot of times, MUN clubs and conferences are all about the youth. And I think it's a wonderful initiative because for so long, young people have been completely ignored or excluded from the political scene. But without the tireless engagement and dedication of all those people who are, to put it politely, no longer 20 years old, well, none of this would be possible. So we, the students, would like to thank you, teachers, directors, UN and school staff, guest speakers, as well as the tech and press teams for helping us organize such an incredible event. We hope that this experience will be just as fun and unforgettable for you as it is for us. Now, because of what we strive for and believe in at FerMUN, it might be that some call us idealists. It's rather a polite way of saying that we're too naive, believing that the world, peace, and a fair society are possible. Those who say such things might like to say that they're just being realistic, that they know what's possible, or rather, what's impossible. But as one of my favorite historians, Rutger Bregman, puts it, realism is a form of laziness, because it presents the world as just being a certain way, as if there's nothing you or I could ever do to change that. And so the solution would be to just do nothing or continue doing what we've been doing in the past. But dreams and ideals are so, so powerful. not only because they drive us forward, but because they actually have a tendency of becoming a reality. An end to slavery, democracy, women's rights. At some point, all of these things were just someone's dreams and ideals. And yet, here they are today. That's why I'd like to remind each and every one of you, dare to dream. Don't be afraid to imagine a better future, because by doing so, you're taking the first step into transforming that reverie into a much needed reality. Thank you very much for your attention, and I yield the floor back to the chair.
Thank you very much, Maureen, for your opening remarks. We'd now like to invite Ms. Tatiana Volavaya, Director General of the United Nations at Geneva, to present her opening remarks. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. It's a real pleasure for me to welcome you to this 12th edition of FerMUN. Of course, I would be very happy to welcome you in the Palais des Nations, like I did welcome many of you 2 years ago when we had a meeting in January 2019. But unfortunately, the situation is not allowing us to have this meeting in person, but I am always saying, whenever you have a cloud, always you have to look for a silver lining. And this virtual mode allows us to have here the participants from 39 schools, from 17 countries, and this really global audience is making this edition really special. Of course, I'm sure that the life will come back to normal, and hopefully later next year we will be able to welcome you in the Palais des Nations. But anyway, I think that what we are going to discuss today and what you are going to discuss during the next days is crucial. Because really, when I was thinking what I was going to talk to you about multilateralism, about the challenges which we all face, the whole humanity these days, but of course, we have to start with the pandemic, because pandemic is not only the health issue. All of us have realized for many months ago that this is also a social and economical challenge. It's not only about the health. It's not only about the virus. It's about many other things. And really, we see that it's more about our dedication to better world, to equality, to democracy, to sustainable development goals. Because what we saw during the pandemic, we saw that those who are vulnerable before the pandemic, they became more vulnerable during the pandemic. Those who did not have access to fresh water could not protect themselves during the pandemic. Many countries and many millions, dozens of millions of people in the world do not have access to vaccination. They do not have access to medication. And of course, we saw during the pandemic how those who were poor before the pandemic were the first to lose their jobs, were the first to lose their incomes, and they really became poorer as a result of the pandemic. And as the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, said in his end of the year message, the pandemic is a moral and real life test. And together with the health crisis and the unequal distribution of vaccines come other tests, such as the deepening of poverty, the worsening inequalities, the falling short of climate commitments, and the ongoing conflicts, divisions, and misinformation. But also the times like pandemic, the times of crisis is not only the time of crisis. It's also the time of great opportunities, because exactly during the time of crisis, humanity realizes the necessity of working together, of being together. And I think it's not by chance that League of Nations, the first multilateral organization, was established as a result of the First World War. And the United Nations, United Nations were born as a result of the Second World War, when really the humanity understood that in order not to repeat the tragedies of the past, in order to learn lessons, in order to work together, in order to support each other, we have to unite. That's how the United Nations were born. And what we see today as a result of the pandemic, that the United Nations are more relevant than ever. And that's not just the statement of the representatives of the United Nations. That's what you, people of the planet, young people of this world, really think. Because, you know, in the year 2020, we celebrated 75th anniversary of the United Nations. And we had a global conversation. It started before the pandemic, at the beginning of the year, then it went on during the pandemic. And the result of this global conversation, or these millions of dialogues, or of those millions of answers to global survey was, the people want more United Nations, people want more multilateral cooperation. And that's why today, when we are talking about our challenges and our strategies, we are always saying that our strategy is to have a new, more inclusive multilateralism, and this multilateralism will be the instrument to reach our goals. We already have the Agenda 2030, and this agenda is more relevant than ever, because everything we are talking about today, be it climate change, human rights, women's rights, protection of vulnerable people, fight with poverty, fight with inequality, decent work, etc., etc., it's already in the Agenda 2030. And of course, we have to use our possibilities, our efforts to work on this agenda. When we are talking about sustainable development goals, we are always saying that for us, it's clearly important to build a world where nobody is left behind. And quite often you can hear the words, we have to rebuild back better. We have to build a better future. And these are not just political words. These are not just the words which come from national or international representatives. It's exactly our common agenda for the future, because all of us want the future where everybody can have a decent education, where everybody can have a decent work, where everybody can be vaccinated, where everybody can travel, where everybody's human rights are protected. So that's exactly our today's agenda. And being amid the pandemic really tells us that we have to show solidarity in order to reach our goals. And for us, it's in the United Nations, talking to you, the young people, involving you in our activities is crucial. Quite often you can hear that you are the leaders of tomorrow. But of course, you are already leaders today, because you pick up many issues which are crucial for the future, not only your future, the future of the planet, the future of all other generations, like climate change, for example. And really, we value your view, we value your criticism, because we really need criticism, and we need really strong voices making us to act quicker and to act more energetic. And I think this model United Nations is crucial. And I really would like to thank all of you for spending many months, many weeks to prepare this event. Because it's important during the days to come, where you'll have really international intergovernmental dialogue, intergovernmental conference, you will learn a lot how to listen to each other. Because quite often you will be presenting the views, the positions you personally might not share. And that's very important, because it's important to understand the position of different countries, of different regions, of different generations, to listen to them, to understand, and to try to find the consensus. So I wish you a very productive and very dynamic dialogue. And I wish you to use this experience of the coming next days and to use the things you will learn, you will acquire in your everyday activities. Coming back to your work, coming back to your studies, you will be able to rely on these experiences you received during these days. And of course, I'm looking forward to the next edition of FerMUN, hopefully in person and hopefully in the Palais des Nations. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very productive day.
Thank you very much for your inspiring words, Mrs. Director General. We now invite Dr. Tedros, Director General of the World Health Organization, who joins us via video to give his remarks. Dr. Tedros, you have the floor.
Dear colleagues, students, and friends, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected all of us, our loved ones, our communities, and our shared humanity. Your voice and engagement are needed more than ever as the world responds to this unprecedented crisis. You don't have to wear a uniform, call yourselves activists, or get elected to participate. You just have to be brave enough to care. Start by being a better listener, a better friend, a better neighbor. Get to know the people in your communities. Caring can make this world a better place. Start conversations about issues facing young people and society, such as mental health, domestic violence, alcohol, drug use, and education. The only way we can take on the global crisis of the future is by working together in solidarity. Whether we're facing pandemics, climate change, or whatever tomorrow may bring, dare to be a part of the solutions. You may not have the power to change the world, but you can change someone's life. And that's how change starts. WHO is committed to engaging with youth, including through our Youth Council and Youth Hub, as well as by partnering with youth organizations to support the global youth mobilization effort. More than ever, the world needs the ideas, the energy, and the leadership of young people to build a healthier, safer, and fairer future. The future is yours, and you have to shape it. I thank you.
Even if you couldn't be with us in real time, we really appreciate your contribution, Dr. Tedros. Thank you so much. We would now like to present our FerMUN 2022 opening video assembled by our wonderful communication team.
My name is Barch, Maureen Barch. And as Secretary General, it is my immense pleasure to welcome you all to our 2022 FerMUN Conference. If you're watching this video right now, it means that you care. You care about the world we live in, the people, and all the other life forms that we share it with. But if we wish to continue protecting our planet and mutually grow with one another, well, we need change. But what does change even mean? Change implies a change in the way that you live your life, in the way that you consume, in the way that you interact with others, in the way that you conceive the world, in the way that you think, in the way that you breathe. Yeah, seriously, just take a deep breath. And you'll realize that no matter how difficult or radical change might seem to be at first, well, it can make for some pretty radical transformation sometimes. Oh yeah, incredible. But one of the things we forget is that the simple ingredient to all this change and transformation we're talking about is dreaming. If you take a few seconds to look back on your life, you'll see that the dreams you had before led to the person who you are today. And that's why at FerMUN we believe that the dreams that we have now will help shape us and the world tomorrow.
Footballer.
An astronaut. Rugbyman.
An actress.
Paleontologist. Un militaire.
Mad scientist.
Médecin. Astronaute. Vétérinaire. Astronaute.
Astronaute.
Archaeologist.
Militaire, mais maintenant j'ai changé d'orientation et j'aimerais finir ingénieur.
So I'm the delegation of Denmark,
Je suis la délégation du Danemark
and therefore
therefore. What do you say therefore? Ainsi, rae.
Dear interpreters, translators, and admins of bilingualism, your wonderful team has enabled us to overcome language barriers and facilitate the exchange of ideas during our conference.
Plus que jamais, vous avez contribué à faire de FerMUN un lieu d'échange et d'idées, et sans vous, tout cela n'aurait pas pu être possible. C'est pour ça que pour vous montrer notre reconnaissance, au nom de l'équipe FerMUN, nous vous disons
1000 fois merci.
Hey guys, so what movie should we watch tonight?
I'd much rather figure out what current events are happening in the world right now.
This year at the World Health Organization, delegates will be discussing how to ensure global and equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. Dans un deuxième temps, les délégués débattront des mesures qui pourront être prises pour prévenir et prendre en charge les maladies chroniques de l'obésité et du diabète. One of the things I learned when discussing with the World Health Organization chairs was that moving and living a healthy health style is super important. So that's why we've organized a little exercise routine for you guys. Come on, now, it's a chair exercise routine, so I need you all to participate sitting down. Start off with some neck rotations. And the arms. 1, 2, 1, 2. Side thingies. 1, 2, 1, 2. And then do some waving in the air like you just don't care. And the legs. 1, 2, 1, 2. Et n'oubliez pas, pour votre santé, de manger 5 fruits et légumes par jour.
In the International Labour Organization, we'll be debating how to mitigate labor exploitation within the textile industry and reduce the negative impacts of fast fashion. Ensuite, on débattra comment fournir un enseignement accessible et de qualité afin de promouvoir une main-d'œuvre plus qualifiée et résiliente.
Dans notre comité de l'Organisation mondiale de la propriété intellectuelle, nous débattrons des façons de garantir la promotion et la diffusion des technologies respectueuses de l'environnement à une échelle mondiale. The second topic that will be discussed is in what ways intellectual property can be used to efficiently lessen the health hazards linked to the COVID-19 pandemic.
At WIPO, we'll be looking at how to encourage innovation to protect the environment, such as this candle made of 100% recycled materials, or this 100% biodegradable fruit packaging. Dans le Conseil des droits de l'homme, nous allons débattre quelles mesures adopter pour lutter contre les atteintes aux droits de l'homme des minorités religieuses, and then how to address the escalation of racial discrimination in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Au programme des Nations Unies pour l'environnement, nous regarderons comment protéger l'écosystème de l'Arctique en tenant compte des enjeux territoriaux. And then, we will try to find measures that can be taken to ensure long-term sustainable access to clean water.
Hi there! It's a beautiful sunny day in the year 2050. So, as you can see, the Arctic has changed quite a lot. What used to be beautiful white snow is now all grass. And so due to excessive territorial disputes regarding the precious resources of this area, the only snow that's left is this. If only someone had tried to come up with solutions to prevent this disaster.
In the Security Council, we'll be debating how to end the armed conflict and illegal occupation in Israel and Palestine, et puis quelques solutions pour prévenir la famine et résoudre la crise humanitaire au Yémen.
Alors bonjour, donc moi je suis Florence Baudry, je suis la directrice du programme FerMUN au lycée international de Ferney-Voltaire et j'organise la conférence FerMUN depuis maintenant 10 ans.
My name is Mr. Ackroyd. My friends call me Alan, and I have been here for a long time. I'm going to say 27 years, and I've been part of the MUN club for 12 years.
Alors un de mes meilleurs souvenirs MUN, c'est la première fois où l'école du Rwanda, Green Hills Academy, est venue. Parce que ça, c'est une école que j'avais trouvée par relation. Et à distance, on avait commencé à mettre en place cette activité MUN. Il y avait cette école du Rwanda d'un côté et une école aussi du Kenya. Et on fait tout ce travail à distance pendant longtemps. On devient amis en fait à distance avec les enseignants à l'autre bout de la planète qui se mettent à monter cette activité. Et le jour où je les ai vus dans la salle des Nations Unies, je vous avoue, j'ai eu une grande émotion. Je me suis dit, ça vaut la peine de s'accrocher, ça vaut la peine d'avancer, parce que la rencontre a eu lieu. Et d'ailleurs, depuis, c'est des établissements qui continuent à participer. Et si tout va bien, le Rwanda sera encore avec nous cette année. Et c'est parti d'une conversation autour d'un café et se dire que maintenant, ce partenariat avec le Rwanda dure, ça c'est un beau cadeau.
Donc malheureusement, il n'y a que le Rwanda qui participe à la conférence en présentiel cette année, ce qui est assez ironique.
Et puis après, je peux aussi vous confier des choses qui me manquent avec le Covid, c'est qu'on ne peut plus participer à des conférences à l'étranger, donc je ne peux plus accompagner des groupes d'élèves à l'étranger. Et ce qui est plus difficile pour moi, c'est que je ne peux plus m'acheter de chaussettes. Parce qu'à chaque fois que je vais à une conférence MUN à l'étranger, je m'achète une paire de chaussettes. Et d'ailleurs, la paire de chaussettes que je porte ici vient d'Istanbul. Vous pouvez la filmer. Et donc voilà, j'ai acheté des chaussettes un petit peu partout dans toutes les conférences où je suis allée. Donc voilà, c'est sur un ton plus léger. Parce que MUN aussi, c'est MUN is FUN, vous le savez, MUN is fun.
It's tiny. It was very small, there were about 8 people, and it was seen as a bit nerdy, I guess. What's all that about? But it soon expanded. Yeah, I think many students in all sorts of ways have benefited from the club whilst they're in it, and I think it's taken them further on certain careers. It teaches you about other countries, about injustices. It teaches you to empathise with poor countries. It teaches you to empathise with rich countries, and it actually teaches you to empathise with dictators like North Korea. We've had a student had to be North Korea in a conference and try and win a debate, which was quite an interesting moment. I know students who have gone on to careers locally in Geneva they work for diplomatic services now as a result of MUN. Somebody I know very well, because of her experiences in MUN, set up her own NGO at university welcoming refugees from Syria. I can talk about students who, whilst they're in school, have benefited. One of the things that we built in at the beginning was to give a place to somebody whose marks aren't the best, but who has tried hard and wants to find a way of doing something well, not just in the classroom. We've had 1 or 2 students whose attitude has been very poor, but we still took them because they were so passionate, and because of what they did in MUN, you could see that their whole attitude in school improved. Yeah, it might be fun representing North Korea, but I think I'd like to get up and make a speech that makes people accept my amendment, not from an egotistical point of view, but because my amendment will make the world a better place.
Quand je marche à FerMUN et que je vois tous ces femmes et hommes débattre, échanger et représenter un point de vue, je me rends compte à quel point chacun d'entre eux est un esprit, une idée, une personnalité et une source de lumière pour l'humanité. Vous êtes le ciel étoilé qui nous guide la nuit dans nos moments de doute et de difficulté. Voilà pourquoi, quel que soit l'avenir, quelles que soient les difficultés ou quels que soient les événements qui vont vous arriver, n'oubliez jamais de le prier pour ce que vous êtes et de le résoudre en étant ce que vous êtes. Voilà pourquoi nous vous remercions avec toute l'équipe FerMUN de participer à FerMUN.
Oh no! Ricky ran away! She must be so excited for FerMUN to start.
Thanks again to the communication team for putting together the FerMUN video this year. We'll now have a musical interlude presented by students from our very own FerMUN International School. Thank you to the FerMUN students who participated in the production. We really appreciate your help. Next, we'll have guest speakers explain their efforts to create a more humane, just, and sustainable world. First, we invite former FerMUN participant, Mrs. Kira Kazuk, Project Officer at International Organization for Migrations, to present her work. You have the floor. Sorry, I don't think we can hear you, Kira. No. If it's okay with you, we can move on to the next speaker and you can fix your sound issues. Okay. We now invite also a former FerMUN participant, Killian Barch, a master's student in aerospace engineering at the University of Cambridge, to present his way of taking action in our modern world. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Is there a way that my screen share can also be shown? Perfect. So, Honorable Chair, distinguished guests, dear delegates. Nowadays, we constantly hear about rising CO2 emissions and the threat of global warming. I don't know about you, but when I hear facts such as that methane is 23 times worse than carbon dioxide, I still don't really feel like I know the big picture. So here is a big and complicated picture. It's a breakdown of all the greenhouse gas emissions and to which fuel, which sector, and which final service they correspond. So even though methane, which is down here, is a lot worse per molecule than CO2. We emit so much less of it compared to carbon dioxide that in the end, methane only accounts for about 20% of our emissions impact, which is still very substantial, but CO2 is the major player. The main takeaway that I would like you to have from this graph is that the whole energy that we take from fossil fuels, so oil, natural gas, and coal, this big sector here, represents almost 70% of the whole, which most of the rest of comes down from agriculture, as our vegetarian and vegan friends remind us. So fossil fuels are very central to the problem, and we've been emitting a lot of them over the past century. So I often wonder, wouldn't it just be great if we had never discovered them in the first place, being the core issue and that it's kept getting worse? Well, let's not take our current situation for granted. Improved life expectancy, which I've plotted here on it, correlates very strongly with our addiction, if we can call it that, to fossil fuels. Discovering how to convert the energy in coal into work was revolutionary, literally. That's why we call it the Industrial Revolution. This energy bonanza allowed us to build and use steamboats, planes, tractors, laundry machines, and dishwashers, to name a few. Thus, ideas and people spread. Peasants weren't required to produce food, and the burden of household tasks, often excessively placed on women, was greatly diminished, to name only a few advantages. So many institutions have recently been coming up with ambitious goals for net zero, which essentially means that human-caused emissions of greenhouse gases are balanced by human-induced absorptions of them. So if we take the example of the United Kingdom, it would seem that the goals are quite achievable given the past trends of emissions. But this graph here doesn't show the whole story. On top of recorded emissions, often international aviation and shipping, as well as imports, are not included in national carbon budgets. And a lot of the gains already had were the easiest ones to do, and the work to come is a lot harder. In the example of the UK, it was switching the energy from coal to natural gas, which brought large reductions in carbon emissions. If you read articles or listen to the news, you might hear a lot about hydrogen and carbon capture. Carbon capture is essentially where humans try to become plants and suck carbon out of the air and store it somewhere. But these technologies are simply too far off to contribute substantially by 2050, which is when the science says we need to achieve this goal. So we need to develop them for the long run, yes, but in the next decades, we can't rely on them. The required reductions can only come from existing technology and behavioral change. Or we need to get really lucky and hope that the majority of the scientific community has severely underestimated the amount of carbon we can spew in the atmosphere. Small tip, I wouldn't count on that one. So we come to aviation. Aviation is the field where the total gross emissions are expected to grow the most in the future. 3 months ago, IATA, the Associations of Airlines, published this graph here, saying how they're going to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050, despite expecting flight numbers to increase as they did before the pandemic. Looks great, right? They seem to have it all figured out. Well, let's look at it in a bit more detail. The main contribution here by 2050 will be synthetic aviation fuels, also called SAFs, this big blue section here. Synthetic aviation fuels are essentially, you take CO2 that's already in the atmosphere instead of fossil fuels where the carbon is underground, and you combine it with hydrogen, which requires a lot of energy, which has to be green, to create a synthetic kerosene, essentially, which then you can burn in the same airplane, and the carbon that you're emitting was already in. The great advantage of this technology is that it's already here. We know how to do it. The planes can pretty much fly on it today, and it doesn't require a lot of research. The only drawback is that it requires a very large amount of green energy. According to my own estimates, if you look at producing it with nuclear plants, for example, you'd have to triple the current 500 nuclear power stations to 1,500, or add an equivalent, which would be massive, amount of wind turbines. And this, keep in mind, is just to take care of the carbon emissions for the aviation sector. Aviation represents 2% of total emissions today. It's going to be a lot more in the future, as other sectors are a lot easier to decarbonize, but still, big problem, we're not producing enough energy if we don't have fossil fuels. What are the other contributions that they look at? So incremental improvements in engines, changing the efficiency, doing some operational changes, small player. Future disruptive technologies like hydrogen and battery-powered aviation or carbon capture and storage, those are way off in the future, not realistic that they're coming in anytime soon, but they account for this. And then the last one is offsetting. Offsetting is where typical example is, let's plant some trees. So you can essentially capture some carbon using increasing plants, but this doesn't really solve the problem because it still stays in the natural cycle. So when you add a tree, you take carbon out of the atmosphere, but then when the tree rots or is burned, it returns into it. And the whole fossil fuel issue is that we're taking carbon from underground and adding it to this natural cycle. So afforestation, adding trees, and is crucial for ecosystems and biodiversity, but it will not deal with the issue of us using fossil fuels and will help with the agriculture part of the problem that we were talking about earlier. The other idea could be maybe digging trees and putting them underground, but that doesn't really seem reasonable either. So if we look at IATA's plan over the next 30 years, we can see that it excessively relies initially on offsetting and also these sustainable aviation fuels. So the real conclusion that I would draw is not that we can continue business as usual and hope for continuing growth in passengers, but rather that we really need to start flying less until these future technologies can come on board. Obviously, airlines would not want this, but the general idea that I would like to encourage is that we can't be hoping for technologies that don't exist today to do most of the work decarbonizing if we want to achieve this by 2050. So my three main takeaways regarding flying are: first, when possible, and if you can afford it, travel by train and maybe even make the journey into a trip by visiting some of the cities on your path. Instead of flying from London to Munich, take the train and do a stop in Paris. Secondly, a policy goal should be that price needs to correspond better to carbon cost, so that, for example, electric cars and trains are slower but economical compared to flying, which is a lot worse in terms of carbon and a lot harder to decarbonize. Finally, a lot of people like to say, oh, but we can't force people to stop flying. Well, if we look at the past 2 years, traveling only when strictly necessary was accepted and done by almost everyone when the threat was primarily aimed at the lives of our parents and grandparents. So now let us do the same when it's the lives of our children and grandchildren that are at stake. Thank you very much. I yield the floor back to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barch, for your wonderful presentation. We'll now again like to invite our former FerMUN participant, Mrs. Chiara Kazuk, Project Officer at International Organization for Migrations, to present her work. You have the floor. I think we have the same problem as before. I don't know if you can fix it.
Can you hear me?
Oh, it should be working now. Yeah, great.
Super sorry, I think my microphone stopped working. 2 years of remote work have not made this any easier, it seems. I want to thank you, Galileo, for introducing me, and also a special thank you to the organization committee for inviting me to speak today. I'm really delighted to be here, marking the start of an extremely exciting occasion for everyone, the beginning of a new FerMUN conference. My name is Chiara Kazuk, and as Galileo just said, I'm currently working as a project officer within the International Organization for Migration, or IOM, but I'm also a former FerNA student and have participated in 2 of the earliest editions of the FerMUN conference in 2012 and 2013. While I think we're all disappointed that this conference is no longer happening in person, I'm honored to be a small part of this opening ceremony, talking to you about IOM, our work, and the importance of international cooperation to address the major issues facing our world, and which you'll be experiencing the inner workings of through your participation in this conference. Mobility is linked to most major international events, and well managed, safe, and dignified migration is an integral part of this. As the UN Migration Agency, IOM is the leading intergovernmental organization in the field of migration and is dedicated to promoting humane and orderly migration for the benefit of all, providing needed services and advice to governments and migrants. Initially established in 1951, IOM very recently joined the UN in 2016 as a related organization, and our activities are tightly linked to the realization of a number of commitments laid out in the 2018 Global Compact on Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, as well as the famous 2030 Agenda. In a nutshell, the organization's operations span guidance for the management of migration, the promotion of international cooperation on migration issues, the provision of humanitarian assistance to migrants in need, including those in vulnerable situations, as well as the protection of migrants' rights and dignity. The division I joined when I started working for the organization 3 years ago focuses on immigration and border management related issues in particular, including policy work to facilitate and enhance the accessibility of regular migration. IOM assists in the search for practical solutions to migration problems to meet the new migration challenges emerging at the national, regional, and international levels. Rising to these challenges in migration management is of particular importance, and there has been no clearer demonstration of this than the COVID-19 pandemic. Leading to massive disruptions to mobility and migration, COVID is a perfect example of the crucial importance of coherent and comprehensive international cooperation. We all know the kinds of effects that COVID-19 has had on mobility, inhibiting travel and the profound impact on people on the move, affecting the livelihoods of migrants and their migratory status. The question of migrant protection is also at the forefront of this, linked to their access to healthcare and now vaccination services. The pandemic is expected to continue being a shaping force for migration and travel in coming years, with effects that should be long-lasting for immigration systems and for people on the move. At the core of the resumption of mobility is the imperative to guarantee that mobility and regular migration remains accessible to all and includes support to migrants in vulnerable situations, fulfilling the commitment of the international community to leave no one behind. The work of the international community is absolutely crucial to tackle the kinds of worldwide challenges that arise from crises such as this pandemic, as well as others like the looming threat of climate change. As I mentioned at the beginning, human mobility is at the core of many of the challenges we will be faced with over the course of the 21st century. The impact of climate change on population movements cannot be understated. While, as you will surely learn through this conference, international cooperation can be time-consuming, transparency, information sharing, and coordination are indispensable to solving these international issues, and the interest you are fostering to these topics through your MUN work is invaluable to prepare you for this. 10 years ago exactly, I participated in the first ever edition of the FerMUN conference, representing Luxembourg in the Human Rights Council at the CERN, and the next year I acted as head of admins for FerMUN 2013, which was then hosted by the International Telecommunication Union right here in Geneva. My participation to both of these conferences, as well as the MUN Club during the rest of the year, have truly been instrumental in shaping my interest for international affairs and political science, and had a defining impact on my choice of studies, ultimately leading me to the field of migration management and my work at IOM today. While the resolutions and debates which you will be taking part in over the next few days are simulations, the level of care that you can put into your preparation, your engagement with these topics before, during, and beyond the conference, as well as the very real discussions you will be having with other delegates and attendees, are sure to have a direct and profound impact on your understanding of the world, of cooperation, problem solving, and consensus building. More than this, an experience such as this one can help you identify what you are passionate about and what you are capable of, and help you develop crucial skills, not least of which public speaking. It is a privilege to be in an environment such as this one that encourages you not only to think about such current topics and engage with them critically, taking on the role of government representatives or international civil servants for the day, but also awards you the possibility to debate them with people from so many different nationalities, backgrounds, and opinions, both real and make-believe. I would like to wish you all a very successful FerMUN conference. I hope debates will be fruitful. I hope that you will all enjoy yourselves. And I also hope that this experience can help motivate you to lend your voices to the big issues our generations will face in the future. Thank you all for your time and attention, and I yield the floor back to the chair.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Next, we'd like to invite Ms. Karen Che, founder and CEO of International Bridges to Justice, to present their work. Ms. Che, you have the floor. It looks like we're having technical difficulties with Ms. Che. We'll now move on to hearing about how young people can take action in today's world. We'll hear from Mr. Olivier Quartermain from Glace France. You have the floor.
Hello all. My name's Oliver, and the way I've decided to take action in today's world is through a local NGO that provides food and clothing for refugees stuck on the Franco-Italian border. We drive across to Ventimiglia and hand out food in a small car park near the motorway. Whenever possible, I try to talk to the refugees either in English, French, or even I try my bad Italian. Just before Christmas, I met a 17-year-old from Côte d'Ivoire called Junior. He was very shy when I first met him, but was happy to talk to someone who spoke his language. He'd made this long trip from Africa to Italy completely on his own, and said one of the main reasons he was trying to get to France was to be in a country in which he understood the language and could study. Most of the refugees we meet are between 17 and 25 years old, so they seem to prefer talking to younger members of the organization, as we are probably easier to relate to than the older. Not all the refugees that we meet want to talk though, but I believe they simply like to be treated as human beings because it's something they don't always experience as refugees in a country far from home. Those that do want to talk have even tried to teach me a few of their words of their language. So I've had an Afghan boy my age who tried to teach me some Pashtun, of which I can't remember any, but he managed to keep a smile on his face all the way through our conversation, even when he talked about losing his friends and his parents and siblings along the way. He was now only left with his cousin to keep on traveling. When I asked him how he kept a smile on his face, even in his situation, he answered that on the inside he was smiling, on the inside he was crying, but on the outside he was smiling because he had no other option. Whilst these relationships built with other refugees of my age are brief and leave me with a sense of guilt when I compare my situation and realize how insignificant my problems are compared to theirs, I'm always happy to have had a conversation with them and maybe made a small change in their lives. I believe it's important for youth in today's world to sometimes step out of their comfort zone, to take small actions which realistically take up a very small amount of time and effort to put a smile on someone's face or to make them feel like human beings. Thank you, everyone. I now yield the floor back to the chair.
Thank you so much, Oliver. We appreciate your contribution. We're now going to try to, again, get a hold of Ms. Karen Che, founder and CEO of International Bridges to Justice. Ms. Che, you have the floor. Sorry, I don't think we can hear you, Mrs. Che. Yeah, we're still having technical difficulties. Donc ensuite, on va écouter Flora Abissa qui vient d'Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. Vous avez la parole.
Distingués aux responsables du FerMUN, honorable présidence, auguste assemblée, je m'appelle Abissa Flora, en classe de terminale au lycée international Jean Mermoz de Côte d'Ivoire. Et c'est une immense joie et un honneur tout aussi grand pour moi d'être ici parmi vous, en cette cérémonie d'ouverture du FerMUN, pour vous parler de l'engagement de la jeunesse. Et ce, malgré notre déception de ne pouvoir nous rencontrer de manière présentielle en raison du contexte sanitaire. De nos jours, certains adultes pensent que la jeunesse n'est pas engagée. Eh bien, ils se trompent. Notre génération est bel et bien engagée. Nous sommes engagés de diverses manières. Nous avons tous quelque chose qui nous tient à cœur, que cela soit la protection de l'environnement, la diffusion de la culture ou encore l'humanitaire. Chers camarades, je vous invite donc à trouver la cause qui vous porte à cœur et à agir pour elle, car agir, c'est s'engager. Un autre élément qui m'intrigue, c'est que pour beaucoup, l'engagement rime avec appartenir à une association, ce qui est faux. Affirmer cela, c'est réduire un tout à une partie. Je le dis avec fierté, je suis engagée, et ce, sans appartenir à une association. Et beaucoup d'autres sont comme moi. Nos actions à nous nous sont indiquées, non pas par une autorité, mais par notre cœur et notre conscience. Ne vous méprenez pas sur mes paroles. Il est très noble d'appartenir à une association. Je tiens tout simplement à dénoncer le cliché précédent et à démontrer que l'engagement peut être collectif, mais aussi individuel, et qu'il est à la portée de tous. Pour ma part, mon engagement est dans l'humanitaire. J'aime aider les personnes, surtout les gens les plus démunis. Depuis aussi longtemps que je m'en souvienne, à chaque fois que j'ai vu des personnes dans le besoin, je me suis demandé, à leur place, qu'aurais-je voulu qu'on fasse pour moi? Et ensuite, je le faisais. Que cela soit de donner de la nourriture, de donner de l'argent ou encore des livres. J'en appelle donc aux humanistes à l'intérieur de vous et vous exhorte à en faire de même. Dans notre monde, il y a clairement des plus favorisés et aussi des défavorisés. Mais l'heure n'est pas à l'acceptation de ces inégalités ou de l'injustice de ce monde. Bien au contraire, nous devons lutter contre elles. Pour terminer, aujourd'hui, dans le cadre du FerMUN, nous sommes tous invités à agir comme des délégués, à agir dans l'intérêt de notre pays. Mais nous sommes capables de tellement plus que d'une simple imitation. Je vous invite donc, très chers camarades, à agir comme des ambassadeurs engagés, certes auprès de votre pays, mais aussi auprès d'une cause qui vous tient à cœur et que vous saurez faire valoir face aux autres délégations. Je vous remercie pour votre attention et je passe la parole à l'interprétation.
Dear all, my name is Flora Abessa, and I'm very grateful to be here with you at the FerMUN opening ceremony to discuss youth engagement despite our deception and not being able to meet up due to the health context. Today, most adults consider that young people are much less engaged than previous generations. Dear adults, you're wrong. The youth that is in front of you is very much engaged. We are all engaged in one way or another. We all have something we care about, whether it's the protection of the environment, the diffusion of culture, sports, or humanitarian work. I invite you, dear friends, to find the cause you care about, if you haven't already, and act upon it. Because to act is to commit. Another element that intrigues me is that for many people, commitment rhymes with belonging to only an association. This is not true to say that this is to reduce a part of the whole. Well, I say it with pride. I'm committed without being part of an association, and many others are like me. Our actions are not dictated by an authority, but by our own will. Don't get me wrong, it is very noble to be part of an association, but I want to show that commitment can be collective as well as individual, and most importantly, that it is within everyone's reach. Personally, my engagement lies in the humanitarian cause. I like to help people, especially the most disadvantaged. For as long as I can remember, every time I saw people in need, I asked myself, what would I want someone to do for me? And then I would do it, whether it was giving money, food, toys, or even books. I call upon the humans in you to urge you to do the same. In the world, there clearly exist some people who are favored and others who are not. But this is not the time to accept the inequalities and injustices of the world. On the contrary, we should rather try to fight against it. To finish, today in the framework of FerMUN, we are invited to act as true diplomats acting in the interest of their country, but we are capable of so much more than imitating them. I suggest that you act as diplomats committed to your country, but also to a cause that is dear to you, and that you will have to put forward to the other delegations. Thank you for attention. I yield the floor back to the presidency.
Merci Flora et merci Timothée pour l'interprétation. Pour les autres speakers, vous pouvez rester pendant l'interprétation. We'll now hear from Ms. Nada Freeman from Washington, D.C., USA. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to speak to you today and partake in this opening ceremony, whether in Geneva or sitting at my desk. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., but I'm currently studying abroad in Rennes, France. Studying abroad at 16 has been an incredible experience, and I've grown in incalculable ways. However, when I'm asked about it, the most common remark is some variation of, "But you're so young." I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the struggle of being too young. While we're the future of the world, our voices are so often dismissed as inexperienced and naive. As a result, we struggle to find our place in the world and are forced to watch others dictate a future that they will never have to live through themselves. Nevertheless, we are still determined to remain involved. Growing up in the age of the internet has created an unprecedented opportunity to amplify our voices. In a globalized world where the internet has fused itself inextricably to our lives, what was once hindered by borders, distance, and politics is now accessible with the click of a button. Through social media and the internet in general, we have created our own Silk Road of cultural exchange. While society isolated itself for the past 2 years, we continue to travel the globe without ever leaving our rooms, constantly expanding our perspectives, connections, and understandings of the world. Living in the US for the majority of the pandemic, I was in awe of the involvement that I saw around me. Using digital platforms to create massive online communities, youth leaders translated their virtual efforts into historic events. Thousands of people, many of them teenagers, answered their call and came out in the streets in Minneapolis, Washington, and around the country every weekend to protest, to volunteer, and to advocate. Online content from these events became part of a digital ripple effect, inspiring communities across the world to take action. In this way, youth activism and outreach on online platforms has helped to link distant communities and form cultural connections that once seemed impossible. Last year, my school in the United States started holding monthly discussion sessions with a girls' school in Swat, Pakistan. For the first time, instead of being filtered through the media's voice, we heard students' perspectives directly. This was an incredible learning experience because it removed the layers of distance and perception that separated us and enabled us to actually engage with and learn from each other personally. Perhaps the most important thing that we've gained through the internet, then, is this control of our own narrative. As we all know, language holds immense power, and when we provide our perspective ourselves, we rewrite the narrative of what it means to be young. What may once have been characterized as naivete is really just our stubborn hopefulness and refusal to give up on our future. Our new ideas do not represent inexperience or lack of knowledge, rather a desire to change what we know is broken. Growing up in this globalized world, youth involvement means reimagining traditional norms into expanded ideals befitting of our naive vision of a better future. As everything changes and everyone adapts alongside it, we must continue our ceaseless efforts to involve ourselves and make our voices heard. Thank you very much, and I yield the floor back to the chair.
Thank you so much for your speech. We'll now try again to invite Mrs. Karen Che, founder and CEO of International Bridges to Justice, to present their work. Mrs. Che, you have the floor.
Does it work? I think so, yes. Just try.
We can hear you.
Can they hear us? But can we hear them? Yes, talk.
We can hear you.
Oh yeah, I can't hear them. Talk. Here, I'm here. Okay, talk.
Thank you so much. I think that now you can hear me. My name is Karen Che. I am so absolutely delighted and honored to be here with all of you. It's inspiring for me to see the younger generation really taking it by the storm and dreaming with hope and understanding that in order for us to have change in the world, it's important for us to both dream and take action. I also had a dream when I was younger, and that dream was that one day every person in the world would have the protection of a lawyer so that they would not be tortured. I worked before at the United Nations in Cambodia, and one day, walking into a prison, I met a 12-year-old boy who was tortured and did not have access to a lawyer. And he was there for stealing a bicycle. This was back in 1994, probably before many of you were born. And I realized at that time that if we worked together with governments, because most governments throughout the world have all passed laws on the books that say you have a right to a lawyer and a right not to be tortured, that if we worked together with governments to implement their own laws that said people had the right to a lawyer and worked systematically at it, that something could be done. And as I think many of you have experienced with your dreams, sometimes not everyone believes in them. But I was very excited and very fortunate because as I founded International Bridges of Justice, I was able to work with like-minded people who believed that this was a possibility and that it could happen. So today, International Bridges of Justice is present in over 40 countries with 30,000 lawyers who have provided the protection of a lawyer in more than 400,000 cases. But this has not come easily. And in many ways, as I reflect on it, it is not only about the dream and the vision, but having the grit to continue despite challenges. I remember many times that as our Cambodian defenders who have worked tirelessly to move their country from a place where almost every single person was tortured to today less than 5% of people being tortured because they have the protection of a lawyer. I remember them encouraging their colleagues from every part of the world. And as their colleagues were saying, this is not possible, we don't know how we can do it, they said, listen, we've got to keep on, keep on, keep on. And I'm reminded of so many people and so many defenders who said, you know what? Even when we don't have resources, we must be innovative, we must be creative, and we must find the way. I'm thinking about Innocent Maja, who headed our program in Zimbabwe, and walking into a prison one day, and as we walked into the prison, we saw so many people who were there, some for months, some for years, who had been there without the protection of a lawyer. And as we walked out, they said, don't forget us, don't forget us. And Innocent said afterwards, we won't forget you. But as he came back before, and I remember we were at a training, he said to so many of the lawyers there, we've got to help. These lawyers, we must help. We are their hope. And so many of them said at that time, I remember they were at a break, they said, you know what, we can't do this, we don't have resources. But Innocent said, no, we must do justice. And the lack of resources is never an excuse. And slowly, piece by piece, they figured out ways that they could bring defense and are still doing this today within the countries. I'm talking about some of our defenders who have had true grit, but I also realize that really, you, the youth, are the future. And recently, we started a Youth for Youth movement, realizing that the future is in your hands more than ours. So I would just like to give Nathaniel Wong, who's a member of our Youth for Youth with International Bridges to Justice, the floor for 1 minute to tell you a little bit about it and ask really that you join us in our efforts.
Hey everyone, my name is Nathaniel Wong and I'm speaking on behalf of the IBJ Youth for Youth Justice Initiative, a global network of over 400 students in 12 different countries committed to providing equal access to justice to young people everywhere. More specifically, we work to connect talented youth to help incarcerated minors in the name of justice. Over the last year, thanks to our youth justice champions and youth networks, we've been able to accomplish a number of incredible things, such as the release of 43 child detainees. One of my personal favorite projects is Dorcas, a student from Burundi whose project Nina Haki, or I Have the Rights To, has been supporting incarcerated Burundian girls in detention, setting up an emergency hotline and providing them with legal assistance in period products. And the reason why I'm talking to you today is because we would love for you to join us, to empower you to make a difference in the lives of minors all around the world. Activities span from joining or creating IBJ youth clubs, raising awareness, fundraising, or even projects of your own innovation and passions. The Youth for Youth initiative also provides a network for you to collaborate and innovate with other driven youth prepared to make a change. To get involved with the movement, please contact the email youth@ibj.org or visit the ibj.org website and look at the Youth for Youth initiative page. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We just want to leave you with this one last inspiration of mine, as well as I believe will be an inspiration to so many of you. And that is a 4-year-old boy that I met when I was in a Cambodian prison. His name was Vishna. He was born in the prison, so he only knew prison life. But I remember that when I met him, he was 4 years old, and the guards used to allow him to go in and out of the prisons. But by the time I met him, his head was getting bigger, and he would like slowly climb through the bars, like the first, the second, and the third bar, and then slowly turn his head and go back down. And every day would come and run and grab my little finger because he wanted to go visit the other prisoners in the cells throughout the prison. And I remember sometimes we would lift him up and he would put his finger through. Sometimes he would dig through the dirt on the bottom of a cell and put his finger through. And most of the prisoners said, you know, this kid, Vishna, he's our greatest hope, and we wait for him every single day. And he was a kid who walked through the prisons and always did what he could. And I remember he was always like, I'm just one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. And this is really my great hope and joy to be here today. Really, youth are the future. You're absolutely amazing. I was just so amazed and inspired to see what FerMUN has done. Your potentiality is beautiful. I know you can't do everything. My one hope and request to you today is to please place on your life agenda that we one day end torture as an investigative tool by giving everyone the right to a lawyer. If you can and are interested in also connecting and joining us within our movement, please do. Thank you so much. And may you be continuing to be blessed in all that you do, and thank you for your inspiration.
Thank you so much for your inspiring presentation. Next, we'll hear from our final speaker on how young people can take action in today's world. We invite Mrs. Chespertunga from Kigali, Rwanda, to take the floor.
Hello. Hello, distinguished guests, directors, fellow delegates, and colleagues of the organizing committee. Welcome to the 2022 FerMUN conference. My name is Chespertunga. I'm from Green Hills Academy, Rwanda, and I'm part of the delegation of France. Being young is about facing challenges and creating a space for development. It means turning problems into opportunities and solutions for our generation. We as young people play a crucial role in today's world, no matter what society we are in. We transform what we see in our daily lives into a vision. We have the ability to change the world for the better, so why not do it? There are so many amazing young activists, but one of my favorite people is Sophie Cruz. Sophie Cruz was born in the United States with undocumented parents. At the age of 5, she had a chance to meet the Pope and gave him a letter hoping that he could help her parents and others who were immigrants. Part of the letter she wrote said, Pope Francis, I want to tell you that my heart is very sad because I'm scared that one day ICE is going to deport my parents. I believe I have the right to be happy. All immigrants, just like my dad, feed this country. They deserve to live with dignity. They deserve to live with respect. The next day, the Pope had a meeting with the United States Congress, and he took the opportunity to encourage more openness for immigrants and refugees. Sophie continued to talk and advocate for immigrants' rights, and she has since visited the White House, sat in Supreme Court hearings, and campaigned for people to vote. Ineza Umuhoza Grace is another young person making a difference. She is an eco-feminist working towards climate justice through education, amplifying voices, and advocacy in Rwanda. She decided to act from her experiences of being exposed to climate change impacts and feeling powerless. She was reminded by the local media in Rwanda of the vulnerability of women and children, especially due to climate change. From that, she felt eager to do what she could, when she could, and she's focused on doing small actions that can have a long-term impact. After her graduation in 2018, she started up an NGO known as Green Fighter, which recently won a grant worth $42,000 from the Global Environmental Facility. The Green Fighter is a group of ambitious youth who are ready to meet any challenge in the path of protecting the environment while ensuring sustainable development in the community. The organization has designed and implemented 3 projects meant to address the pressing issue in the environmental community and organized more than 10 community environmental education programs with more than 1,500 young people as direct beneficiaries. Another person who is a great activist is Leia Namu. She was inspired to act against climate change by Greta Thunberg because she too realized the power of her own voice. She held her first solitary climate action protest in Kampala in February 2019 and marked her 15th birthday by planting 200 trees and launching Birthday Trees, a project that provides saplings to people who want to celebrate their life by planting trees. To this date, Leia has planted more than 3,000 trees. It is still not too late to act. You must take action. You must do the impossible, because giving up is never an option. You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, yet I am one of the lucky ones. These are some of the quotes from speeches of none other than Greta Thunberg. At the age of 15, Greta protested outside the Swedish parliament to pressure the government to meet carbon emission targets. Her small campaign had a global effect, inspiring thousands of young people across the world to organize their own strikes. The small protest turned into a worldwide protest called Friday for Future, with more than 1 million students protesting for their planet. So what do all these people teach us? They teach us that we can inspire and cause change. We can try even when there seems to be no hope. We can advocate for what we believe in, and we can possibly change the world. As the youth, we shouldn't only rely on the current generation, because soon we will be the next leaders, the next advocators, the next innovators, and so much more. So who are we? Because the way I see us is not as young people, but as minds that can find solutions to emerging crises in the world, eyes that can look out for the environment and each other, and mouths that can speak up against injustice in this world for people who can't. Just like all these young leaders, we can make a big change. We don't need to be known as worldwide figures to have a voice in what needs to be done. We just need some compassion for our world, compassion for our communities, and compassion for others to make small differences, because all these combined can inspire many and change what we see our future as. Thank you. I now yield the floor back to the chair.
Thank you, Jesper, and thank all of you for your extremely inspiring presentations. We'll now have our very own FerMUN presidents present their committees and issues, which you'll be debating for the next 3 days. Lita Diego, présidente de l'OMPI à FerMUN 2022, vous avez la parole.
Merci Galiléo. Donc, dans le comité de l'Organisation mondiale de la propriété intellectuelle, plus pertinent que jamais dans l'actualité. En effet, premièrement, nous adresserons le débat autour des technologies écologiquement responsables et le rôle des lois de propriété intellectuelle qui les encadrent. Dans une époque dominée par les préoccupations de l'urgence du changement climatique, la question d'adaptation et de compromis est essentielle. Les développements technologiques offrant des alternatives éco-responsables sont primordiaux à un avenir durable. La dans le dialogue sur une transition vers le vert. Ensuite, notre deuxième problématique s'intéresse à la propriété intellectuelle dans le contexte de la pandémie de la COVID-19. Les liens entre les recherches et les nouvelles découvertes scientifiques et la population lors de cette crise sanitaire ont mis en évidence l'importance de l'information et surtout l'accessibilité des documents. Comment comprendre ces nouveautés scientifiques ? et apprendre à mieux se protéger et à s'adapter dans un débat autour de la levée de brevets sur le vaccin contre le coronavirus est une preuve de l'importance des lois concernant la propriété intellectuelle dans cette crise sanitaire. Bien que la compétition dans le domaine de découverte scientifique est importante pour les progrès, l'accessibilité serait discutablement prioritaire. Néanmoins, un équilibre doit être trouvé afin d'assurer le développement de solutions qui seraient accompagnées de sécurité et d'égalité quant à l'accès aux nouvelles découvertes. En bref, dans notre comité, basé sur la collaboration de manière générale. Il existe entre scientifiques et l'État, entre entreprises et gouvernements, les relations sont primordiales à tout progrès dans le domaine de la propriété intellectuelle. La levée de certaines lois de propriété intellectuelle met en avant un choix à faire dans les domaines écologiques tout comme sanitaires. Un choix concernant la priorisation du profit ou de progrès et de partage. La question reste nuancée et nous avons hâte du comité de l'OMP. Je cède la parole à l'interprétation.
Welcome to all. I am chair of the World Organization for Intellectual Property, and our first issue will concern new technologies which aim to improve our relationship with the environment. We will be looking at the alternatives to be more responsible in terms of impacts on the environment and working towards a green transition. Our second issue will concern the recent COVID-19 crisis and how research and how they are given to population can be managed, and how the scientific breakthroughs can be published so that we can avoid misunderstandings such as that with the vaccine. We must learn to adapt to these new changes, and this is why our committee is primordial. We will try to find solutions which are fair and which take into account everyone's needs. We will search for solutions which are based on collaboration, and we will see how to adapt to certain changes in laws concerning intellectual property. I hope you all have a great conference.
Merci Lita pour votre discours. Ensuite, Emma Tounsi, présidente de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé à FerMUN 2022. Vous avez la parole.
Pardon. Merci Galiléo. Alors, je m'appelle Emna Tounsi. Je suis honorée d'avoir l'opportunité de présider l'OMS pour cette session de FerMUN 2022. Comme vous le savez déjà tous, depuis maintenant presque 2 ans, nous faisons face à une pandémie mondiale qui est celle du Covid-19. Nous avons eu la chance d'avoir pu freiner sa progression grâce au développement du vaccin. Ce pourquoi il est nécessaire de remercier les scientifiques qui ont tout mis en œuvre pour que l'élaboration du vaccin soit la plus rapide et efficace possible. Cependant, son inégale répartition rend la lutte contre le coronavirus plus compliquée. Lorsque certains pays administrent une 3e dose de vaccin, d'autres pays n'en sont encore qu'à la vaccination à l'échelle locale. D'ailleurs, certains grands variants proviennent notamment de régions au taux de vaccination très faible. Cette inégalité de répartition peut ralentir le combat contre le Covid, car nous serons véritablement protégés que si nous atteignons une sorte d'immunité collective, c'est-à-dire qu'une large majorité puisse avoir les défenses immunitaires nécessaires pour combattre le virus. Pour cette raison, il est crucial que le plus de personnes possible aient accès au vaccin, et ce, dans le monde entier, afin que le monde puisse reprendre une vie normale. Cette épidémie mondiale est au cœur de toutes les préoccupations, et par conséquent, elle est très médiatisée, ce qui la met davantage en avant. Malheureusement, toute cette médiatisation du Covid fait passer en second plan d'autres maladies tout aussi importantes qui touchent une proportion non négligeable de la population, notamment les maladies du diabète ou de l'obésité. Il est commun de penser que ces maladies sont dues à une mauvaise alimentation ou à la mauvaise hygiène de vie des gens, mais en réalité, pour certaines personnes, ces maladies peuvent être chroniques. Il est donc important de se soucier de ces maladies, tout aussi importantes les unes que les autres. Même si moins de personnes sont atteintes de ces maladies, en comparaison avec le Covid, il est de notre devoir de faire de notre mieux pour que le plus de personnes aient un remède efficace contre leurs maux. On est donc ravis d'entendre les multiples solutions que vous avez à proposer afin d'améliorer la prévention et la gestion de ces maladies. On a hâte de commencer notre conférence et de découvrir les positions diverses et variées de nos pays et organisations concernant ces problèmes actuels majeurs. Ensemble, unissons nos esprits et nous réussirons très certainement à innover pour le bien-être de l'humanité. Je rends la parole à l'interprétation.
Welcome all. Thank you, Galileo. My name is Emna Tunsi, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to preside over the WHO for this session of FerMUN. We've been facing COVID-19 for almost 2 years now. We slowed it down thanks to the vaccine, so I would like to thank the scientists who made this possible. However, unequal repetition of these vaccines makes the fight more complicated. While some countries are on third dose, others have barely started their first vaccine drive. Big variants often come from countries with low vaccination rates. We will only be protected once we gain some sort of herd immunity. This is why it is crucial that the world gains equal access to the vaccines. This global epidemic worries us all and has been massively mediatized. However, this mediatization risks making us forget other illnesses, which could be seen as just as important, like diabetes or obesity. We must remember these illnesses and keep working to defeat them. We are excited to hear about the solutions you will propose. We are excited to start this conference and to discover the many different positions of your countries and organizations. Together, let's unite our many ideas, and we will certainly succeed in innovating to help humanity. I yield the floor back to the chair.
Merci, Emna. We now invite Morgan Dawson, President of the International Labour Organization at FerMUN, to present their committee. Morgan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Gary. Hello, FerMUN directors, board members.
Sorry, Morgan, I think your audio is, it's like crackling. Do you know how to fix it? No, we can't hear you at all.
Can you hear me better?
Nope. Do you think you can unplug your headphones?
Better now.
No. In the meantime, nous invitons ensuite Cassandra Schneider, présidente du Conseil des droits de l'homme, à présenter son comité. Cassandra, vous avez la parole.
Merci Galiléo. Bonjour à tous et bienvenue. Donc, je vais parler du Comité des droits de l'homme. Je m'appelle Cassandra. Avant tout, je commencerai par dire que le Conseil des droits de l'homme est un organe intergouvernemental du système des Nations Unies, créé dans un but très précis. Il est chargé de renforcer la promotion et la protection des droits de l'homme dans le monde. Il a également pour mission de faire face à des situations de violation des droits de l'homme et de formuler des recommandations à leur sujet. Et ces derniers temps, les droits de l'homme sont mis à rude épreuve, voire menacés pour certaines populations ou personnes. Il est alors du devoir de tous les États membres de rétablir ces droits de l'homme tels qu'ils doivent être et tels qu'ils le méritent de l'être. La pandémie de Covid-19 a touché tous les pays, toutes les populations et toutes les personnes. Mais certains font face à plus de répercussions que d'autres. Les répercussions ne sont pas que des problèmes de santé. Nous faisons face à une non-égalité et des discriminations raciales ou autres entre personnes. Personnes comme vous et moi pouvons en subir, mais certains groupes sont plus touchés que d'autres. Depuis le début de la pandémie de Covid-19, de nombreuses formes de stigmatisation et de discrimination ont été signalées, notamment la xénophobie à l'égard des personnes que l'on pense responsables de l'introduction de Covid-19 dans les pays, les attaques contre les travailleurs de la santé et les violences verbales et physiques à l'égard des personnes qui se sont remises de la Covid-19. Des attaques contre des populations confrontées à une stigmatisation et une discrimination préexistantes, notamment les personnes vivant avec le VIH, les personnes issues de minorités sexuelles et de genre, et les migrants ont également été signalés. En somme, trop de formes de discrimination et stigmatisation ont été signalées. La stigmatisation et la discrimination sont contre-productives. Elles exposent les gens à la violence, au harcèlement et à l'isolement, empêchent les gens d'accéder aux services de santé et empêchent les mesures de santé publique de contrôler efficacement les pandémies. La lutte contre la stigmatisation et la discrimination dans le cadre de la réponse à la Covid-19 fournit au pays une orientation fondée sur les droits par le biais de l'éducation, du soutien, de l'orientation et d'autres interventions. Elle propose des solutions dans 6 domaines spécifiques: la communauté, le lieu de travail, l'éducation, les soins de santé, la justice et les situations d'urgence et humanitaires. Les droits de l'homme peuvent alors espérer être retrouvés pour tout le monde, tels qu'ils devraient l'être, mais ces solutions doivent voir le jour de toute urgence dans tous ces domaines. Aujourd'hui, les minorités religieuses sont constamment confrontées à de graves violations des droits de l'homme, ainsi qu'à l'exclusion sociale, la marginalisation économique, la pauvreté et la discrimination, tant dans les pays en voie de développement que ceux développés. Auparavant, l'atteinte aux minorités religieuses ne se faisait que dans un pays sur 5 il y a 2 ans, soit déjà trop. Mais désormais, elle se fait dans un pays sur 3. Ces pays ne respectent pas les minorités religieuses, mènent parfois à des persécutions déclenchées par un État ou un groupe religieux quand cela peut être considéré comme une menace d'après eux. Certains de ces groupes en question font partie des 3 principales religions monothéistes comme le christianisme, l'islamisme et le judaïsme. Afin d'endiguer le non-respect des droits de l'homme des minorités religieuses, il est important de cibler différents domaines, notamment celui du politique, du culturel, du judiciaire et de l'éducation. Le tout à différentes échelles, locales, régionales et internationales. Merci de votre attention. Je passe la parole à l'interprétation.
The Human Rights Council is an intergovernmental body of the United Nations system created for a very specific goal. It is responsible for strengthening the promotion and protection of human rights around the world. Its mission is also to deal with situations of human rights violations and to propose solutions concerning these issues. Lately, human rights have been threatened for certain populations or individuals. It is therefore the duty of all member states to restore these human rights as they should be, and they deserve to be. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected all countries, all populations, and all people, but some face more repercussions than others. We face severe racial inequalities or other discrimination between people. Some groups are more infected aside from us. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, many forms of stigma and discrimination have been reported, including xenophobia towards people believed to be responsible for introducing COVID-19 into countries. Attacks against populations facing pre-existing stigma and discrimination, including people living with HIV, people from sexual and gender minorities, and migrants, have also been reported. Tackling stigma and discrimination in the response to COVID-19 provides countries with rights-based guidance through education, support, guidance, and other interventions. It offers solutions in 6 specific domains: community, workplace, education, healthcare, justice, and humanitarian situations. Today, religious minorities constantly face serious human rights violations, as well as social exclusion, economic marginalization, poverty, and discrimination, both in developed and developing countries. These countries that do not respect religious minorities sometimes lead to state or religious group initiated persecutions, where it can be viewed as a threat in their opinion. And some of these groups in question are part of the three main religions such as Christianity, Islamism, and Judaism. In order to stem the lack of respect for the human rights of religious minorities, it is important to target different areas, in particular that of politics, culture, the judiciary, and education, all at different scales, local, regional, and international. Thank you. I yield the floor back to the chair.
Merci Cassandra pour votre discours. We're now going to try and invite Morgan Dawson, President of the International Labour Organization, back to the floor. Morgan, you have the floor.
Thank us now.
Your audio is still, no, it's still bad. Sorry. In that case, nous invitons ensuite Jules Morel, président du Conseil de sécurité, à présenter son comité. Vous avez la parole.
Merci Galiléo. Chers délégués, chers auditeurs, chers chargés du bilinguisme, chers auditeurs, honorables participants de FerMUN 2022. Le Conseil de sécurité est un organe de l'Organisation des Nations Unies. Il vise à maintenir la paix et la paix internationale aux zones de crise dans des domaines divers et variés. Cette année, nous avons l'opportunité de pouvoir traiter 2 sujets ancrés dans l'actualité depuis de nombreuses années. La résolution du conflit israélo-palestinien, officialisée le 14 mai 1908, à la première guerre israélo-arabe, sera notre premier sujet. Nous cherchons l'occupation illégale israélienne en Palestine et la fin imminente du conflit armé. Il faut en effet aboutir à des négociations et installer durablement la résolution de ce problème historique datant déjà de 2 siècles. Les conséquences de ce conflit sont nombreuses et ont déjà entraîné la mort de plusieurs dizaines de milliers de personnes. Cela doit cesser. Notre deuxième problématique traite de la crise humanitaire et de la famine au Yémen. Nous enregistrons d'ores et déjà plus de 4 millions de personnes fuyant les violences et les combats. Près de 70% de la population dépend de l'aide humanitaire. 6 années de guerre ont détruit les infrastructures, les routes, les maisons, les écoles et les hôpitaux. L'économie s'est complètement effondrée. La pandémie de coronavirus et la menace d'une nouvelle épidémie de choléra par la saison des pluies ne peuvent être jugulées par un système de santé et ses établissements non opérationnels. L'accès humanitaire est limité par les autorités. Ainsi, des centaines de milliers d'enfants souffrent de malnutrition et de maladies. Seul le Haut Commissariat aux réfugiés, resté sur place, apporte son aide à la population. La collecte de fonds pour financer l'aide humanitaire perdure, sans parvenir à financer ce qui serait nécessaire. Cherchons ensemble à résoudre pacifiquement cette crise. De nombreux enjeux politiques, géographiques, historiques et géopolitiques régissent nos deux problématiques. Nous allons donc avoir besoin de vous, délégation de la Chine, France, Inde, Iran, Israël, Kenya, Mexique, Norvège, la Fédération de Russie, l'Arabie Saoudite, le Royaume-Uni, les États-Unis, le Vietnam, le Yémen et enfin de l'État de Palestine. Délégués, nous vous souhaitons bonne chance dans votre travail. Bienvenue à FerMUN 2022. Je rends la parole à l'interprétation.
Honorable delegates, members of staff in charge of bilingualism, and participants of FerMUN 2022. The Security Council is a major committee in the Organization of the United Nations. It aims to maintain peace and international security within zones of crisis on different topics. This year, we have the opportunity to debate two topics which have been anchored in the media for many years. Firstly, the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict formalized on May 14, 1948, during the First Arab-Israeli War will be our first subject. We will seek an end to the illegal Israeli occupation of Palestine and an imminent end to the armed conflict. The consequences of this conflict are numerous and have already resulted in numerous and tragic losses. Our second issue is about the humanitarian crisis and famine in Yemen. We already have more than 4 million internally displaced people fleeing the violence and fighting. Almost 70% of the population depends on humanitarian aid. 6 years of war destroyed infrastructure, roads, houses, schools, and hospitals. The economy has completely collapsed. The coronavirus pandemic and the threat of a new cholera epidemic by the rainy season cannot be contained by a non-functioning health system and its facilities. Humanitarian access is limited by the authorities, resulting in hundreds and thousands of children suffering from malnutrition and disease. Only the High Commissioner for Refugees, which remained, provided assistance to the population. Fundraising for humanitarian aid goes on without being able to finance what is needed. Many political, geographic, historical, and geopolitical issues govern our two issues. We will therefore need all the delegations present in this committee. Thank you all. I yield the floor back to the presidency.
Merci beaucoup, Jules. We'd now like to try one last time to invite Morgan Dawson, President of the International Labour Organization, to the floor. Morgan, you have the floor. No. Okay, in that case, we'll move on. Finalement, Agnese Chiabera, présidente du programme environnemental des Nations Unies, va présenter son comité. Vous avez la parole.
Merci Galileo. Alors, bonjour à tous. Promis, c'est un des derniers speeches pour aujourd'hui, mais le Comité des Nations Unies pour l'environnement voulait vous dire qu'il est tout à fait ravi, lui aussi, de vous accueillir à FerMUN 2022, surtout après tant de préparatifs et d'imprévus si admirablement surmontés. Donc, je m'appelle Agnese Chiabera et j'ai l'honneur de présider le comité de l'UNEP cette année, aux côtés d'une équipe de chair tout à fait fantastique. J'aimerais donc simplement vous présenter certains grands problèmes que l'humanité n'est pas encore parvenue à surmonter à ce jour, notamment en ce qui concerne notre planète que mon comité a pour vocation de protéger. Cette année, Nous avons choisi d'attirer le plus de regards possible sur une petite molécule qui se fait toujours plus rare et plus convoitée à travers le monde, c'est-à-dire l'eau. Donc, pour commencer, je ne vous apprends rien en disant qu'elle n'existe qu'en quantité limitée sur Terre. Et cependant, l'homme semble avoir quelques difficultés à comprendre la chose, puisque voilà qu'elle vient à manquer chez telle ou telle population, causant des maladies là où un manque d'argent ou de volonté n'a pas permis de la rendre potable, obligeant des jeunes à faire des kilomètres pour en dénicher quelques litres, les empêchant d'aller à l'école, et compromettant enfin de manière générale le futur de milliers de personnes. C'est donc parce que l'avenir d'innombrables individus est aujourd'hui rendu incertain par de telles situations de stress hydrique que l'UNEP essayera, durant les 3 jours à venir, d'unir ses idées pour redistribuer de la manière la plus équitable et durable possible l'eau parmi les êtres humains du monde entier, afin que chacun puisse ainsi mener la vie la plus épanouie possible. Par ailleurs, l'eau à l'état liquide n'est pas la seule dont la gestion pose aujourd'hui problème. Pour ceux qui auraient eu la chance de s'aventurer un peu plus au nord que l'Islande, en effet, on tombe sur un bloc d'eau gelée immense, communément appelé banquise, qui est actuellement rapetissi à vue d'œil, mais duquel dépendent tout un tas d'êtres vivants, et humains y compris. En effet, si la glace arctique et le permafrost venaient à fondre, ce ne sont pas seulement des centaines d'espèces qui disparaîtraient, mais aussi des tonnes de gaz à effet de serre, autant de bactéries et virus potentiellement dangereux qui seraient libérés dans l'atmosphère, causant une augmentation de la température globale de plus de 12 degrés, une hausse conséquente du niveau marin qui rayerait plusieurs villes de la carte. Or, cette région du monde, qui est une véritable bombe à retardement en réalité, apparaît le plus souvent aux pays du monde entier comme un nouvel Eldorado où puiser leurs ressources et affirmer leur puissance économique. Chacun se rend donc bien compte que la situation est assez délicate et qu'il devient particulièrement urgent d'agir pour sauver ce qui peut encore l'être. Mais fort heureusement, c'est ce à quoi s'appliqueront pas moins de 90 cerveaux dès la fin de cette cérémonie. On espère donc que les délégués de l'INEP feront de leur mieux pour mettre l'intérêt personnel de leur pays et organisation de côté, afin d'œuvrer conjointement au bien-être de la planète, duquel dépend celui de l'humanité tout entière. Merci pour votre attention, bonne conférence à tous, et je passe la parole à l'interprétation.
The United Nations Committee for Environment is pleased to welcome you to this conference. My co-chair Diane and I would like to present one of the challenges humanity has not yet overcome: water. As you all know, water is limited. However, this seems subject to misunderstandings, as some people lack this resource, which leads to disease. Young people must travel long distances to access water and are therefore deprived from education, which compromises their future. It is for the future of these individuals threatened by water stress that we will take these 3 days to put together our ideas to reform the distribution of water fairly to all those in need. Another issue we will explore is the North Pole ice cap, which is reducing dangerously and which threatens both local wildlife, and humanity as a whole. The ice and permafrosts are starting to melt, and if that would reach its final point, we would have to face planetary catastrophe, raising global temperature by more than 12 degrees Celsius. However, this region is often seen as a possibility for exploitation and economic power, when in reality, it is a virtual ticking time bomb. We thus hope that the delegates of UNEP will do their best to put their differences aside and work together to find the way to the well-being of our planet and of humanity. I wish you all a good conference. Thank you. I yield the floor back to the presidency.
Merci Agnese et encore merci à l'équipe d'interprétation pour la traduction des discours. Nous allons maintenant inviter notre secrétaire général adjoint, Jordan Mbok, pour faire ses remarques de conclusion. Jordan, vous avez la parole.
Merci Galiléo de m'avoir introduit. Donc c'est un grand honneur pour nous de célébrer avec vous le début de la conférence de FerMUN 2022. Nous approchons la fin de cette cérémonie d'ouverture et nombreux d'entre vous ont hâte de rejoindre leur comité, de contribuer à la conférence. Et pourquoi cet échange international, c'est un moment propice au débat et un moment que personne n'oubliera. Mais néanmoins, nous nous permettrons de vous rappeler qu'il convient de vous exprimer avec un langage diplomatique. Nous sommes conscients que, submergés par l'amour du débat, nous pouvons tenir des propos déplacés par amour de la victoire. Mais lors d'une conférence comme la nôtre, nous appelons à la modération et au consensus, parce qu'une délégation efficace, c'est celle qui met tout son comité d'accord et permet la paix. Soyez juste, poli, ouvert. Soyez juste, poli, ouvert d'esprit afin que ces 3 jours soient inoubliables. Nous vous souhaitons une agréable conférence. Je passe la parole à l'interprétation.
It is an honor for me to celebrate with you the beginning of this FerMUN 2022 conference. We are approaching the end of this opening ceremony, and many of you cannot wait to join their committees to contribute to this conference and for this international discussion to have a fructuous debate. We remind you to express yourself in a diplomatic manner. We are aware that, submerged by the love of the debate and the will to succeed, we can say inappropriate things sometimes. But in a conference like ours, we ask for moderation and consensus. Because an efficient delegation is the one which puts the entire committee in agreement and sets peace. To be fair, polite, and open-minded for those 3 days, to be unforgettable. We wish you a great conference. I yield the floor to the presidency.
Bien, avant que nous commencions cette conférence et que je donne la parole à Maureen, je vais juste vous demander d'aller liker la vidéo YouTube qui se trouve juste en dessous parce que on est quand même 400 viewers et il n'y a que 80 likes. Donc faites-vous plaisir, likez la vidéo, enregistrez-la et je passe la parole à l'interprète pour qu'il puisse traduire ce que je viens de dire.
Before I yield the floor to Maureen, I would like all of you to go like our YouTube video because it has 400 views and only 80 likes. Thank you.
Merci Jordan et Timothée. Nous vous remercions tous de votre attention et nous vous invitons maintenant à vous diriger vers la plateforme FerMUN. Nous vous souhaitons un débat productif et une joyeuse conférence. We thank you for your attention and now invite you to go to the FerMUN platform. We hope you have a productive debate and a good time at our conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Galileo. We may have gone a bit over time. It's now almost 5 o'clock, but time's just a number, whereas inspiration is eternal. So I may not have our official FerMUN gavel here, but I do have a hammer, and I do have a cool Tibetan bowl. So hear that ringing? That's FerMUN 2022's official beginning. Have an awesome conference, a great afternoon, and see you soon.